Hi, and welcome to today's webinar, Belonging at Work, How to Create Inclusive, Connected Workplaces that Empower Your People to Thrive. And before I cover off the introductions and some housekeeping, I have a question for you all to ponder. According to a recent survey by Reward Gateway, what percentage of UK employees don't feel a sense of connection and belonging at work? Please just ruminate on that for a second or two while I get on with the introductions. I'm Chris Capon, Distribution Director for the UK at Westfield Health. And in a nutshell, I'm responsible for the business-to-business sales operation functions at Westfield Health and across our subsidiary UK Healthcare. And leading a team of around 40 individuals means that daily, both myself and my leadership team have a lot to think about. And ensuring that we have an inclusive, connected and empowered working environment is being top of our list. Hence, my keen interest in today's topic. But this session is not just about me or my thoughts on the subject. To help guide the conversation and to give deeper insight, we're joined by a fantastic panel of experts. We have Vicky Walker, Kathy Lawson, and Stephanie Carey. Panel, please introduce yourselves. Kathy?
I was going to say good morning. It's not. It's good afternoon, isn't it? Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kathy Lawson. I am a executive wellbeing coach and a mental health first aid trainer instructor for the last 8 years. Very passionate about this whole subject of mental health in the workplace.
Thank you. And Steph, I understand you're having some technical difficulties today. Hopefully you can see and hear us okay.
I am. Yes, I can hear you. Hopefully, you can see me and hear me okay. Sorry for the lag. It's ironic I've actually come into the office, but my Wi-Fi seems to be a bit worse. But hi, everybody. Lovely to be here today. I'm an associate director at an organisation called CBRE UK. We are a property consultants, basically operating across the globe. So alongside my kind of day job in the people team, I also lead on wellbeing for our UK business. So again, similar to Kathy, it's a topic I'm hugely passionate about, spend a lot of time investing in and speaking to people about. So really, really good to be here today.
Wonderful. Thank you. Vicky?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Vicky Walker. I'm the Chief People Officer at Westfield Health. So my day job is all about people, and what a great topic to talk about how to make our people feel included and connected in the workplace. So yeah, looking forward to digging in and having some great conversations this afternoon.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining us today. And before we hear more from the panel, I just need to go through a few housekeeping points first of all. The webinar is being recorded. You'll each receive a recording shortly afterwards via email. And you've joined in listen-only mode, so nobody can see or hear you today. You can ask our panel questions using the question box on your screen, and we love hearing from you, and we'll try to answer as many of those as we possibly can. You'll also see some resources that you can download in the materials section. And during the webinar, we'll be taking a poll to include the audience members' experiences. The polls are completely anonymous and optional, but we will share the overall results with the audience. And at the end, a survey will appear on your screens. It would be great if you could give us your feedback. It helps us create future content and webinars, making sure they're relevant. And today marks the start of Mental Health Awareness Week. This year's theme from the Mental Health Foundation is community. And it's a really important theme, and our panel will be sharing their advice for creating that inclusive and connected workplace we spoke about earlier. I have to say, need to note that this session mental health could touch on some sensitive topics such as depression and suicide, and we understand that could be triggering. So we encourage you to prioritize your well-being and take a break if you need to. So what will we cover today? Well, the importance of the workplace connection for mental health and overall well-being, how to create an inclusive culture that strengthens employee engagement and retention, and ways to build a strong sense of community at work that helps employees create meaningful connections and reduce loneliness. So let's kick off with a question I posed at the beginning. So according to that recent survey by Reward Gateway, 2/3 of UK employees don't feel a sense of connection or belonging at work. And I'm not sure where you felt that number would land, but that's quite a powerful stat to me. And we're interested to hear how connected you feel to your colleagues. So here's a first poll. It is completely anonymous. If you could please answer this for us. How connected do you feel to your colleagues at work? Not very connected, neutral, could be better, connected, or very connected? We'll just give you a moment to answer that poll, please. And the responses are coming in now.
It's great to see that there's so many people actually do feel connected.
It's wonderful, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good start, isn't it?
Very strong, very strong. Yep. Okay, I think we've got enough in there. We've got 41% of the audience feeling connected, 31% could be better, and 15% saying very connected. So they're our top three. Kathy, what do you think about this whole subject?
But it's an interesting one because I was waiting to see if actually there was still a throwback to COVID times. And now that the landscape has changed in the workplace and people are being expected maybe to still continue working remotely, and it doesn't suit everybody. So I was quite heartened to see that actually people do feel connected when I imagine there are a lot of people who are working in a very different way to what they used to be working several years ago, and certainly pre-COVID. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
good
and
to see.
I do wonder if it's the wheels turning again, if we're now,
Hmm.
coming out of that loneliness from the COVID period. Yeah. Anything you'd like to add, Vicky, on the poll?
Yeah, I think as Kath said, quite reassuring actually that there is a high majority of people saying they feel connected. And I think, as you say, have we found that new norm of being able to make connections through screens rather than in person as well? Maybe there's some element of that. So yeah, really interesting, and I think a great start to take us on to the rest of the subjects for this afternoon.
Indeed. Any surprises in there for you, Steph?
I don't think so. I mean, you'd always like to see more than 15%, I would say, but I think overall that's really promising and definitely moving in the right direction. And I echo Vicky's point. I think people finding their ways now to connect through screens and through other means is just really coming to fruition, which is great.
Wonderful. Thanks for that. So we see some people are feeling connected, some feel it could be better. But Kathy, in your view, could you tell us why you think it's important to feel that connection at work, and specifically how that lack of connection can impact on a person's mental health and their performance at work?
Well, I think we're inherently social beings, aren't we? And so the workplace provides a an incredible environment where we can feel connected to other people, where we feel that we can contribute, we can feel like there is something bigger than ourselves. We've got relationships, meaningful relationships around us. And so I think the workplace provides a lot more than people imagine. And
Mm,
without the workplace, people can then end up feeling lonely. It can impact on people's self worth, their stress levels. And so the whole psychological safety side of the workplace is so important. And I think organizations are waking up to the fact that well-being and performance are inextricably linked. They're not separate. And if we're not paying attention to the well-being side of things, then it's having a direct impact on performance. And a very little story I can share with you is that I've trained quite a lot of people who work on ships, which is a very different working environment. And when people go working on ships, they go off for maybe 4 to 6 weeks at a time, and so their work colleagues become their new family. And there was one person in particular, the organization's holiday policy changed. And so it became mandatory that you needed to take more time off. And this person shared with us, and he said, the problem was I didn't have an infrastructure at home of meaningful relationships and meaningful activities. And so actually, my mental health really took a hammering when that changed, because actually, I got a lot of what I wanted from the workplace. So I think it's not to underestimate what the workplace provides for people.
mm, okay, that's a really relevant story. From your point of view, Steph?
Yeah, so I think in the corporate space, what I've seen kind of play out and had feedback on is loneliness can really creep in, and particularly when you've got individuals who their workplaces, their infrastructure, similar to what Kathy said. And I had an example where somebody came in on a Monday morning, and I just got chatting to them as you do it, getting some coffee. And he hadn't spoken to anybody the whole weekend because he didn't have that infrastructure there for him. And I think it's too easy to think, oh, everyone's got that family, those friendships, those other support networks, but often that isn't the case. So it's just important to remember that work can really provide that infrastructure for people, and that meaningful social interaction as well.
Okay, thanks. Great example. And Vicky, would you like to add anything?
The only thing that I would add, echoing both Kathy and Steph, in terms of workplaces do provide some people, the only contact that they may have had all week is through people at work. But I think recognising that they can be extreme examples, and not one size fits all. So I think knowing your workforce and knowing the people that work for you, knowing sort of that importance of work on those individuals is really key.
Mm.
Yeah, that's an important point when designing policies and procedures. There isn't that one size fits all. Really have to think about the audience and the colleagues we're trying to reach. Okay, thank you for that. So if we then think about signs that maybe managers could look out for, which indicate that somebody's maybe feeling lonely or disengaged at work, what would those signs look like, do you think, Kathy?
Well, interesting one, because actually you could see increased sickness absence. You could see, oh, there's slides popped up here. You could see all of these things: coming in late, staying late, niggling health issues, people not doing the things that they would normally do, not spending time with their colleagues, not going for a coffee when they normally would do. And then it starts to impact on people's enthusiasm, motivation. Maybe they start making silly mistakes that they wouldn't normally make. I think it's also important to make the point that whilst change is key, so know your people, so you know what's changed, also you may not see anything at all. And that's quite an important point here, because people can mask what's going on for them. So it becomes even more important that managers do get to know their people, so they can notice those subtleties in changes of behaviour. So
I definitely agree with that, Kathy. And I think one of the things that I've observed is when people turn their cameras off, and normally they might have them on. So I know quite often people have their cameras off. They might just choose to do that, and that's how it's always been. But we've had instances where somebody is physically sort of disconnecting from those meetings and from that setup by switching that camera off, and that's been quite an interesting telltale sign for the manager to then pick up the conversation afterwards and just say, kind of what's happening here, and are you feeling okay? I know we're going to go and talk on a bit more about opening up that conversation, but I think it's just so key to spot those signs.
I think to echo both Kathy and Steph's point around knowing your people is the key bit here. What is their normal, and what is looking out for changes in behaviour as to what their normal would be. Because for somebody turning their camera off all the time, that might be their normal. But for somebody, as you say, changing their behaviour, I think is that's the bit that's key. Sort of looking for behaviour signs that are different.
Yeah, and that comes from knowing your people.
yeah, it really does. It
Absolutely.
really does.
Okay. Thank you for your thoughts. And I'd like us to move on to talking now about creating that inclusive culture. But before we do that, I think I'd like to understand from the audience where they think their company is on this journey. And if you could take a moment, audience, just to answer this question: what's your company's biggest challenge when it comes to creating a more inclusive and connected workplace? Is it knowing where to start? Difficulties with hybrid or remote teams, disengaged employees, limited time and resources and not prioritized by the leadership as an option. So votes are coming in, and it's, apart from knowing where to start, this is quite well balanced.
It's really interesting how balanced that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
Wow, this is going to be an interesting discussion. Okay, so as it stands at the moment, knowing where to start has about 10% of the vote. Difficulties with hybrid or remote teams, 23%. Disengaged employees, 21%. Limited time and resources, definitely the top at 30%. And not prioritized by the leadership team is at 17%. So yeah, interesting balance there. Very interesting. Who'd like to add any comments on that first of all?
I think it's interesting that one of the complaints that I've heard a lot when I'm training is that I can't get buy-in from my leadership, from the management and leadership team. So maybe it's not surprising to see that this is a little bit lower still at the moment. And it's a shame in a way, because I think it's quite important that organisations recognise that you need that buy-in from the top, from the leaders within the organisation. And I think the other point to note as well is that when we're creating inclusive workplaces, it's also about considering the wider audiences, like neurodivergent people, for example. And organisations' ability to build communities are going to be quite different, depend on their population of employees. And if we've got 1 in 7 people in our workplaces who are neurodivergent, then that's obviously quite a crucial element to consider. Any marginalised group or any unrepresented group is really quite important. I imagine, Steph, you've come across this as well.
I have, absolutely, yes. And I think it's just so important to kind of just be mindful of all of those groups. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about some of our specific networks a bit later on. But I think having that awareness and for each organisation, it is going to be so different, and depending on perhaps who your leaders are and what their experience in this space is. So yeah, that's kind of, I see a lot of this, and it's very interesting how split this is across the board. Vicky, do you have any more thoughts on that?
I think we're going to come on to a question later around time, but yeah, I think time and resource, we're all sort of time poor, aren't we? And it's understandably that's come out as 30%. I think talk to any leaders in organisations, time. Everyone wants more time, so I'm not surprised that's come out as 30%.
Yeah, and I think what compounds that, Vicky, as well, is you can't build it overnight. It takes time. You've really got to put a lot of effort into it. So if you are trying to start out in the journey, where should you start as an organization? And what are some of the blind spots that companies could face as they're trying to build out an inclusive culture?
Yeah, I think to your point there, Chris, time. Building culture takes time and patience. So much patience and commitment from everybody. As Kathy talked about leadership. So I think they're sort of the big things around time, patience, and commitment. I think talking to your employees, really gaining an understanding of what really matters most to them, because you can go on to a bit of a crusade of what you think's important, but actually you're doing that based on maybe your own thoughts and feelings. But I think talking to your employees to get that understanding of what's important to them is important. You're not always going to get it right, so don't worry about trying something and getting it wrong. I think trying is better than doing nothing. And yeah, be mindful that if you do try things, don't be afraid to do that, but just fail fast if they're not quite working. So I think it's important that you recognise you're not always going to get it right first time, and don't be afraid to try new things because of that. I think it's important that you do keep trying new things, but then fail fast if they're not working, and then go back and keep getting the feedback. But for me, I think patience is key. I don't know if any of the other panelists have got anything else to say on that.
Yeah,
I think if we all had more of that would be great, Vicky.
I think what I really pulled out of that, Vicky, was that two-way communication piece. Don't be afraid to try things. Make sure you're getting feedback on what you're trying. If it's not working, stop it. Think about something else, but do it in an inclusive way. And sorry, Kathy, I think I cut you off there. Is there anything you'd like to add further?
No, I think we cut each other off there, Chris. Yeah, no, I just think patience and time, and also bearing in mind that when we're talking about, we talked about blind spots there a minute ago, and creating inclusive workplaces, is that what's right for one person is not right for the other, and we might think equality means being fair, but actually that's not necessarily the case. Because actually, what's working for one person is not going to be working for somebody else. So important that when we're looking at equality, we're actually meeting people where they're at, not where we think they need to be. So, or where we think they are, I should say.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And Steph at CBRE, how did you go about building this inclusive culture within your organization?
So for us, it was really about getting to know your starting point, and appreciate that probably came out a bit lower on the poll before. But I think it's really important to get super curious about what is going on. So similar to what Vicky was saying before, don't be afraid of what will reflect back at you. I think that can often be a blocker for people wanting to do a deeper dive into some of this stuff, and asking the questions of their employees are kind of fearful potentially of what might come back. So I think some of the things that we used was, in terms of tools, I suppose, we looked at our gender and ethnicity reporting, in terms of our gender pay gap, really just to see where the lay of the land was, and recognise where the gaps were. And really, it's then thinking about those blind spots. So yes, we can identify where we know the gaps are, but what about those blind spots, those areas that we just don't see because we're asking either the same people the same questions, or we're just kind of not broadening our mindset. And I think that's important for leadership to think about, but also for employees every day, really think about where those blind spots are. I think often we've seen, probably not so much now, but we have seen in the past where leadership teams will, they'll get together, they'll sit around a table, they'll talk about all this stuff, what well-being means, what a connected culture means. But as I say, if it's the same group coming together all the time, you're going to get the same results. And I know we're kind of aware of that from a diversity perspective. So really, I think it's just really kind of thinking about this more broadly. Something that we are, I think, really good at. Our CEO takes a real vested interest in what our employees have to say. And I suppose looking at the demographics that we've had in our organisation previously and in our industry previously, we've really tried to shift the dial now with our younger talent, and talent from very different backgrounds to perhaps what has been in the property sector before. And we've actually set up a group more recently called the Social Mobility Network. And within that network, you've got people from, as I say, very different sort of socioeconomic backgrounds, really focusing on building that mobility within this space. And our CEO will literally spend time with this group, with this network, to understand what's important to them. What does good connection mean to them? What does it mean being into the office? How do they get into the office? And how do we really kind of shape their experience being in this business now? And I feel that has made a really big difference. And it's not just the listening, it's then taking the action as well, which is really important, rather than kind of just paying lip service to it. You've got to then take the action to follow through with making it a better place to work.
And what about managers? What role do managers play in promoting inclusivity? How can they help? How can they be part of it? Kathy, any thoughts on that?
I think managers, excuse me, have a pivotal role to play between the employer's day-to-day experience and the policies and procedures of the organisation. And they are also, not to underestimate, they're role modelling the behaviours that they want to see from their people. And I think managers also, it's a tough job. Your head's above the parapet. So don't be afraid to get it wrong and seek feedback and learn from that and do something differently. And, not to make assumptions as well about your people, and definitely get to know them. And if you know you've got some blind spots, and it's language that's come up already around perhaps looking after people's mental health and well-being or neurodiversity, then just learn a bit more about what's going on. And I mean, I do quite a lot of training for managers in mental health first aid skills. And I have to say, I get a lot of very experienced managers through that course, and they still leave knowing something more about themselves or about the people they manage. There's always something more to learn to just get better at doing this. So yeah, don't make assumptions. Get to know your people. Don't be afraid to ask more personal questions. We've got this thing in Britain about, oh, we're not meant to, stiff upper lip and all that, and that we're not meant to be intrusive. Well, actually, in the way that we're working these days, we can afford to be a little bit more personal and to find out what's actually going on with people. Don't be afraid to say, hey, what did you do at the weekend? And what support do you have at home? And how do you take care of yourself? Let's get to know our people, and then we can be a lot more inclusive.
Okay. Vicky, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think with managers, I think Kathy said that, that they import such an important role, but I think we forget sometimes that they're employees themselves. And I think sometimes we expect managers to know all the answers, but I think what we need to try and do is encourage our managers to try and get the support that they need, give them the confidence to help have the conversations, help educate them, help training them. And I think, we've said that they play such an important role. And I think just because they've got manager in title doesn't mean to say that they'll always know the answer. So, and just because you have a policy, I think it doesn't mean that everybody's going to either follow that policy in the same way or implement it in the same way. And, policies are great, but there should be guidance. They shouldn't be, delivered in exactly as it's written. I think you've got to know your people, understand the policy, and don't just try to apply a policy because that's what you feel you should do. I think that's the important bit. Be compassionate, get to know your people, and don't assume that managers have always got the answers. I think a lot of them will need guidance when dealing with these sort of things because it can feel a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there, Vicky. People do need guidance. So is there any practical advice you can give to help managers feel comfortable, starting that conversation about mental health? And Steph, where should they start?
Good question. And I think probably one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was actually ask people what a good day looks like for them. So, what does a good day look like? What does a challenging or a difficult day look like? And it goes back to the earlier point of everybody's different, and that will mean very different things to different people. But I think if you go in with a curious mind as a manager, to Vicky's point, you don't have to have all the answers. And I think a lot of managers get concerned or worried before they have the conversations that they need to have all the answers. You don't. But get prepared as much as you can. Get familiar with the resources that your business has, or even external resources that could be of help. And then just be there to really listen and make sure that you have that, I suppose, that openness to understand whatever comes back with you in that conversation, that you can take it away and then take some action afterwards. But being there to listen, I think, is probably the most important part, and just being curious with your employees. Kathy, I think there was a few more points really that we've got to cover, but I don't know how we're doing for time.
Yeah, well, yes. I really like your point there, Steph, about what's a good day look like for you. Yeah, love that. And also, if you had to score yourself on a scale of 0 to 10, what's the score today? Is that a good day or is that not so good day? How would you describe yourself like the weather? That's a good one for people to give you an indication. And yeah, just don't be afraid to ask open-ended personal questions, really. And just one
And
final.
have a conversation. Really have a conversation with them, a genuine
Yeah,
conversation. Yeah, really
yeah.
important. Yeah. So I'm just conscious of time. We've still got a fair bit to get through today. So we're going to move focus on the ways to build that sense of community, to help support mental health and to reduce the loneliness at work. Because according to Mental Health UK in 2022, 1 in 5, so 20% of workers felt lonely at work on a typical working day. That's almost a quarter, with almost a quarter of workers, 23%, agreed that feeling lonely at work has affected their mental health. So if I come to you first, Steph, you shared some fantastic work done at CBRE in this area, and one of the things you've created is this employee networks. Can you tell us a little more about that and share any results that you've seen?
Yes, of course. So we have 7 different employee networks at CBRE, and they play a really huge part in the culture of our business. So just to give you a flavour, the networks that we have are the Ability Network, and that covers everything from neurodivergence to long-term health to mental health conditions. We have our Family Network, and that covers everything from anything you can think of to do with family, all the way through from having your first child up to caring for parents or loved ones. We have our Proud Network, which is our LGBTQ plus network, armed forces, so anybody associated or ex-military. We have our Reach Network, which is our race, ethnicity and cultural heritage network. We have our Women's Network and our Faith Network. And really what we do in setting these groups up, which was actually done quite some time ago now, but we've really focused on empowering these groups to think about what is important to their members. And actually as a business now, we give them a lot of scope in terms of influencing our policies, influencing how we should go about things, really kind of thinking about how they play a part in the business. So I think it's sort of in giving them that power and that kind of freedom to kind of bring stuff to the business to think about how we could be run better. It brings about a real fantastic sense of community. And I think just happy, for people having other individuals in the organisation that have been through similar experiences that associate to the same sort of backgrounds, that in itself brings people together and creates that community. And I know firsthand there's been experiences that I've been through, that my close colleagues have been through, and they've sought some real solace in these networks because they've been able to go and speak to somebody that might have been through something very similar. Another thing that we do have in addition to that is something called the Futures Boards. And these basically we have our kind of board of directors at the top, but then we have futures boards which are made up of more junior talent within the business, usually up to kind of early management level, I would say. And each of those groups, there's a number of them across the UK, they will have a wellbeing lead. And really by having somebody that is then very much dedicated to thinking about wellbeing in their space, so whether that's in the north, for example, or in Scotland, or in a particular division of our business, they can really kind of get to the crux of what's important to their people within that region or within that group. And then actually, organise events specific to them with a wellbeing focus. I think it goes back to a point previously, you can think about all these lovely wellbeing initiatives. I could sit here and think about them and try and implement them. But if it's not what people want, they're just going to fall flat on their face. So it's really thinking about what's important to those individuals, giving them the kind of tools and empowerment to go ahead with it. A quick example of something the Futures Board set up recently, they've got a weekend walking club in Manchester. So once a month, the team will get together, they'll choose a different location, some people bring their families, some people bring their dogs, and it's just a really nice way of connecting with your colleagues. Appreciate not everybody wants to connect outside of work hours, but that was something that they asked their group and they really wanted to do. So yeah, we've got kind of 150 odd people now across the northern business, and a large part of a majority of them, will take part in that. So yeah, it's just finding out what's important, I think, and if you can set some networks up, I would highly recommend it.
Thanks, Steph. That's really interesting what you guys are doing there. And Kathy, you've got lots of experience coaching, training companies how to improve employee well-being. Can you share some examples of ways to build that meaningful connection? So, things that have worked well for clients in the past?
I think build on what Steph's doing there. There's a lot that's going on there. I think when I was a wellbeing manager years ago, the sort of things that we used to do, we used to have initiatives like walking at lunchtime. We set wellbeing champions up that were, as it says in the title, championing wellbeing. We had focus groups that talked about, as Vicky said earlier, let's find out what people actually want. Let's not put a snooker table in if no one plays snooker. We had the cycle to work schemes. So I think it's just finding initiatives that are going to work for the environment that you're working within, and what works in one is not going to be the same in somewhere else because we've got different size organizations.
Okay, thanks. And Vicky, when we think about the role HR plays, how do you feel HR teams can to help to create this feeling of belonging, and in particular where you've got dispersed teams?
Yeah, I think HR plays a pivotal role in this, but I think I'd also say that I'm really mindful that HR is only one function, and in some organisations it might only be one person, and it might only be two or three people in an HR team. So I think it shouldn't be a function that's solely relied on to generate a culture or a feeling of belonging, but it's absolutely a supporter of it. So I don't think it's its whole responsibility. I think that comes from the leadership of the organisation and everybody within it. But absolutely, HR should be a support. And I think what HR can do is they can support with learning and development for managers. As we said, managers aren't always confident of those conversations. They can lead on things like practical things like recognition events, or seeking employee feedback through surveys around what matters to them and what they would want. Other activities may be sort of volunteering. I think that's always a good thing to bring people together as well. A couple of practical things we do at Westfield as a function, as a HR team. So we've implemented a new starter check-in to make sure people feel that sense of belonging from day one. So we check in after 4 weeks, how's things going, you're getting the support that you need. So yeah, I think there's definitely some practical things. We make volunteering available, so we help organise volunteering for teams so that they can do that together. So yeah, I think HR can support. I don't think it's the sole function that can make it happen.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So thank you all for your insight and your views there. We're going to look to answer some of the questions from the audience now, if that's okay with you guys. So let's see what we've got. Question for you, Steph. The networks are great and work really well for large organizations. Do you have any suggestions for an SME with 24 employees?
Yes, so I appreciate, obviously, I mean, we're about 4,000 people in the UK, so a little more sizable. To be honest, I think if you can create a culture where people can be open about their personal experiences, it only needs one thing or one discussion point to make a connection with somebody. So whatever it is that might be going on, you don't need to necessarily have that formal, like the formality around a network. But I think if you not just as managers, but I think as individuals, if you can encourage people to share and create the opportunities for people to connect, not just on a sort of on a business level, I think conversations naturally open up. And I suppose in my role, whilst we've still got the networks, there's been occasions where I've just connected two people together because I know they've both been going through something quite significant, and they've been able to kind of share and get support from each other. So I'd say you don't need to go down full formal kind of network as such, but creating that openness of a culture where people can share is probably the best route forward.
Yeah, without the label of a network or a group or anything, just where
Yeah.
they can have that conversation. Okay, thanks for that, Steph. And Vicky, we have a question for you. I find it hard on a team leader level to implement things when you don't always have full support from senior management. Any advice?
Oh, tricky one. I think it's around influencing, isn't it? So I think I would start by talking to that senior manager in terms of what's the consequences of not doing something. So I think that sometimes we look at the benefits, but what's the consequences of not doing it in terms of we know that happy, healthy, engaged employees are more productive. There's so much research out there around that. So I think talking to your senior manager around if our colleagues don't feel happy and healthy and engaged, and they won't be as productive as what they could be. So I think talk to them about that, showing them some practical examples of the things that you could do that are not resource, time, and money heavy. So what are the small things that you can implement there? I think I would start small, but don't give up is what I'd say. Patience we talked about earlier, and patience it would be for this as well.
Okay. And one for the entire panel. My biggest challenge would actually be engaging the different generations or demographics with such a huge variance in employee expectations. Any advice on how to do this? Kathy, we'll hand over to you first.
Gosh, yes, that's a huge one, isn't it? Yeah, and without sounding trite, I think my answer to that one would be ask them. What do they need? What do they want? What is going to work for them? It's about understanding where they're coming from. I think Steph talked about this a little bit earlier on about responding to different generations and demographics. So yeah, I think it's set up some focus groups and ask them, what do you need? What would work for you? What would make you feel more valued and engaged in the workplace?
I
Vicky,
think
Steph, I could see nodding heads there. I think you're going to go along with that.
I think it's not going to go away either, is it? I think this is the future of workforce. This is like it's going to be $1 million question as we know the generations and the age of our workforce is just going to get wider. And I think being able to engage and make everyone feel included, it's going to get even more difficult than it is now. So I think, as Kathy says, set up some focus groups, take the time to really listen, and don't make assumptions, I think would be mine.
And when you think about it, we talked about patience and building it up and getting the momentum, getting things set up. And once you've got to that status, how do you then stop it from fizzling out? How do you keep that momentum? How do you keep it moving forward?
I think.
Sorry, Steph.
No, I was just going to say, I think we're probably, Kathy, I think you mentioned before about wellbeing champions. I think you need to identify people in the business that are really passionate about this too. And you'll find that, often those people will make the time, they'll have the energy, they'll have the kind of drive to make some of this happen. And it's it's just keeping the conversation going, so it's not just a flash in the pan, we're going to do this quick wellbeing event and that will help resolve issues or improve performance. It's having a sustained plan, I suppose, with this, and getting those that are interested. I mean, the moment somebody says they're interested in wellbeing, I've got them straight into my mailing list, and I'm kind of speaking to them about it and just getting their ideas. And I think also by implementing and by listening and by implementing some of the ideas that come from the business, they feel like they own it as well. So it's not just a kind of being pushed from HR or being pushed from senior leadership. It's like a genuine care and interest in this topic. Sorry, Kathy, I cut in front of you then.
It was fine. I think there's only two things I would add to what you said there, Steph. One is be proactive. When you've got different locations, different time zones, you have to be a bit more proactive in having that contact. And then the other thing is a great expression. It's not mine, but I'm borrowing it. Rinse and repeat. So if you're going to do something, keep doing it, because don't make it just a one-off initiative. And just because you didn't get much of a response, don't do it again. Actually, sometimes people need to see it several times before they get that you mean it. and that they feel valued because of it. So rinse and repeat. Do it again and again and again. I mean, if you're doing it loads and you're not getting any response, change it. But actually, you need to rinse and repeat a few times before you may get the engagement that you're looking for.
Rinse and repeat. Yeah, I like that. And you touch on something where we do actually have a question in on that very subject there as well. So Vicky, what would you recommend when colleagues are spread across different locations, including different cultures and different time zones?
Well, I can talk on behalf of Westfield House, given that we do have 11 countries, different time zones, different cultures. What I'm going to say is absolutely not easy, and you won't get it right first time. And we're learning and learning, and I think but doing something is better than doing nothing. So I think being mindful, even asking that question, being mindful that you have got to think about the different cultures and the different time zones and making people feel included, because you try and do one great thing, you've excluded one group, and that's took away all that good stuff that you did. But we're learning hard, and it's not easy. I don't think there's not a magic wand out there, and if someone's got it, please share it with me, because I could do with it as well. But I think what I would say is, back through the theme of the whole webinar really, is listen, take time to listen and try things. So yeah, embrace it and ask people what is it they'd want to see in their country that's different to what you've already implemented. But it isn't easy. I ain't going to sit here and say it is, because it's absolutely not. But I think it's just patience and commitment and consistency to keep trying.
Thank you. Thank you. I've got time for one final question, then we'll need to wrap this session up. The question is, a lot of mental health support and interaction are aimed at staff, but who supports the managers? Any advice?
It's a good question, isn't it? It's a good question. And I think there is such an enormous expectation on managers. And so just make sure you're training your managers. Don't assume that they know how to do this. So train them, support them, and then you'll get the best out of them. Because at the end of the day, they are role models for the behaviour you want to see from other people. You're nodding there, Steph. What would your answer to this be?
Yeah, I think that's probably where, well, I don't know if this is right or wrong, but that's probably where I see my role come in from a people, like an HR function, is making sure that they have the tools and I suppose the resources easily at hand so that they know what to do. And I mean, for example, we've got a group of mental health first aiders, so we've got about 100, I think we're now up to about 140, 150 in the business. So I always make it clear that managers can contact these individuals just to have a bit of an offload, just so that they can have a bit of an outlet, because they really, I really feel for managers and particularly that mid-management level, because they are, they're kind of getting it from all angles, and it's really tough. We also do have support through our employee assistance programme, whereby managers can call up the EAP and just talk to somebody about maybe somebody that they're supporting, and just kind of ask for some guidance or, some, I suppose, I think it's a bit about the offload really, because it can be quite heavy, some of the stuff that managers will take on. But then it's knowing who they can come and speak to for the positives, positive steps forward, beyond that as well. But it's tough.
To that.
Sorry, guys, we are out of time. I'm sorry, but I have one quick, and you've got to be quick in your answer. So we'll start with you, Kathy. What's the one piece of advice you'd like our audience to take away from this session? Quickly, please, Kathy.
You don't have to fix people. You just need to connect with them.
Nice. Steph?
Be open and curious.
Lovely. Vicky?
When you listen, really listen.
Wow. Brilliant advice. Brilliant. Thank you very much for joining us, panelists. I really appreciate that. Thank you to the audience as well for joining us today. And sorry we didn't get a chance to answer all of the questions, but as you can hear, it was quite a deep debate there. But there will be some follow-up blogs on our website, and we'll try to cover some of the more common topics that came through in the questions. Don't forget, a survey will appear on your screen. We really would appreciate your feedback, and you'll receive a copy of the webinar soon by email too. And Finally, if you'd like to speak with one of our team about supporting wellbeing in your organisation, please speak with your account manager if you have one, or if not, you can email businessinquiries@westfieldhealth.com. Thank you very much for your time today. Bye now.
Bye everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.